welcome to another episode of Romance Unleashed. My name is Mel, and I am your host. And today we have Dr. Karen Tang.
Hello.
So I am very excited to chat with you and let everyone hear all of the things that we're going to be talking about. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I was just saying off air that this is the first time I've done a book event / podcast recording. And then also we're sitting on a very comfy couch and surrounded by festive pillows. So I'm like clutching a festive pillow, like we're having drinks. This is like the greatest event of all time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Of course.
Let's get right into it. Why is your book called Hysteria?
Yeah, so it's not Hysteria. It started off with a very boring title, like periods, pain, empowerment. But my team and I kind of like threw around other ideas, and this sort of just captured everything. Mm-hmm. And part of it was that it's not just an encyclopedia of facts. It's about women's experiences. Absolutely. And about the fact that so often it's probably more common than not that people struggle to get care for sexual and reproductive health needs, that you have painful periods or hormone issues or fertility issues, perimenopause, and you struggle for so long, and to get someone to kind of take you seriously and to realize it's a medical thing that deserves attention and treatment, rather than, oh, that's just you're just being anxious, right. You're overreacting. There's so many conditions for women's health like endometriosis that it takes years and years and years for people to get diagnosed, because it gets sort of dismissed as like, right. Oh, everyone has bad periods. Everyone has PMS, but when you dig deeper, you find that it's something like endometriosis, PMDD, PCOS, perimenopause, that has an actual, like need for medical treatment. So it basically captured both just the experience that people go through, also the history of it. There's a chapter in the very beginning on history. And, how did we get here? Like, why is it so difficult? And it covers, both like ancient history where, people thought that literally your uterus was like malfunctioning and like just running around. Mm-hmm. The word hysteria comes from the word for uterus in Greek. And then, in the like 1800s, you had like Freud, and like hysteria was like, oh, you are experiencing all these problems because, you're so anxious, and it's just your body is just reacting to this suppressed anxiety. Right. And so still women are kind of treated like, if they're complaining about things, that, oh, it must be like a mental issue and right. not, a health issue, like somebody, like a man would come in for, like a back problem, right. That sort of thing. So the title I thought was really great in terms of just capturing all of that.
Yeah, so what I loved about the title was that in my, I'm doing a bachelor's in women, gender, and sexuality.
Perfect.
So
yes.
We're talking a lot about just hysteria.
Yes, all the stuff.
But something I learned that I didn't know about was that like hysteria was like an actual like treatable condition back in the, I don't know what,
hundreds of years. Yeah.
And that one of like the early treatments of hysteria was like that's how like the first dildo came about. And it was like, you went to this doctor who treated you with the dildo
the vibrators.
To like cure your hysteria. Yeah. So I thought it was like a really great like tie-in to
it's
where we're at.
Fascinating. Actually, I'm going to say, like, I've been playing around with ideas for a second book, and my kind of leading idea is a history of sex and like things like this, that the treatment in the 1800s for some providers, doctors, was they did things like vibrators. Or this is amazing drawing, and I don't know the history of this drawing, but some of you have probably seen it. There's literally a woman in like the Civil War era gown, like it's a drawing, and they're literally like spraying a hose of water at her genital area, and she's like all kind of like keeled back like this, and they're just like aiming at her genitals. And it's the same idea. It was just like kind of stimulating like your genitals, like something about that would then like cure your hysteria. So and like I said, I obviously am not like a historian, but there all are these just very fascinating stories. Like some of them are quite like that's kind of a funny and maybe positive one,
right?
But there's obviously a lot of like negative ones. Like there's the I talked to those of you who read the Yellow Wallpaper, like for a while, like women were like locked up and right. told that they were just needing to kind of just like lay there quietly, like almost right. like infantilized. Right. And so, there's all the different crazy ways that people have treated things. And actually, I mentioned in the book too, like they actually even did things like clitoridectomies, like they like removed the clitoris or like took the ovaries out, just trying to see if something right. about that would fix your hysteria. Yeah.
insane.
Yeah, it's absolutely wild. And when you think about it, like back then, like there are like people like writing medical papers about like, let's remove the clitoris, like clitoridectomy success rates. And yeah, it's wild. It's
because we know who was writing.
Yeah, I always kind of a little caveat because sometimes in my posts on social media, people say, "Well, why are you so anti-man?" I'm like, I'm not anti-man. It's anti, the patriarchy,
right?
The systems and the culture that led to this stuff and the inequalities. It's not like specifically all men,
right?
Yeah,
right.
Sometimes I get accused of being like, "You're like anti-man." No, men are great, but like, some. No. My husband is very nice.
And that like makes me think of, I feel like a lot of women, right, when a man tells them to calm down, right, there is a lot of like, don't ever say that to me again. And I'm just wondering if there's like I'm gonna do some research on this because now it just popped into my brain and I'm like fascinated by it. Like if there is just like a trickle down of like, you've been telling me to calm down for decades and you were trying to remove my clitoris like because you thought like, wild.
Yeah, it's wild. So kind of going back to like the overreacting and all this stuff right now. So do you guys know that like the hashtag, like the women in male fields hashtag on social media?
It is amazing.
It's amazing. It's basically women taking things that women have been told and turning around and applying to like men and showing just how absurd it sounds. And so I made a couple. One was about like sterilization because, women, especially if you're child free, like get a lot of pushback and, if they want to get a tubal. And so, I've heard a lot from both patients of my own and people on social media that they get told like, no, like you're going to regret it. Like you don't know it now, even though you think that you know yourself, but you're going to change your mind. Or if you get married, what about your future husband? And so I kind of turned and said, oh, you want a vasectomy? No. What about your future wife? Like you were meant to be a father. And like, and it sounds ridiculous, but then, oh my gosh, the video went viral and there were like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of comments from men who just like were so affronted because they thought it was real. And they're like, I'm gonna report you to the board of medicine. Like, how dare you? And then they said all sorts of crazy stuff. Like, you could tell that you're not married. And like, I'm like, I am married. They're like, yeah, you can tell that you're, like some like loser lady who can't get a man. And, like, it was all just so wild. And so just this idea that like that women are told that they're overreacting about things, but then when you turn it around and apply it to men, they're like, no, how dare you? Right. Like, it's just, it's an interesting dichotomy. So I think if you're an academic and you're studying this, you should do a paper on this phenomenon.
Yeah, the hashtag is absolutely my favorite thing because it's like everything that we have ever been like gaslit about is like thrown back at them, and I'm like, I love it. It's incredible. I don't know who started it or why, but it's
just the number of people who just don't understand the joke, and they're like, "How dare you say that? That's so judgmental." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's the idea. That's it. You got it."
What inspired you to write this book?
So my specialty is minimally invasive GYN surgery, and I deal with a lot of chronic pelvic pain. So like endometriosis and fibroids and things. And so just in like, before I even did social media, because I came kind of late to social media, only like about 2018, 2019. But before then, just seeing patients in the office and just like every single patient had a very similar experience of, I was not the first doctor, the second, the third, fourth, doctor. They had gone to ERs, they had gotten multiple imaging studies and just, were like just trying for years to get help. And, it turned out that it was something like, to me, seemed very straightforward, like endometriosis or PCOS, et cetera. And just seeing how for such common conditions, and this is part of that history chapter too, is just showing like how common these things are and how like kind of underrepresented they are in research, in funding, given how many people they affect. Like in some cases, like menopause, like half the human population.
Right.
Just how little, the understanding there was in the medical community, how, difficult it was for women and patients, who are assigned female at birth to get the care that they needed. So when I started doing social media, it was partly just to kind of, make people realize that I was there and, you could see me as a doctor, but also to educate and to say like, oh, if you're having these things, you could have endometriosis, or this is, so I was just in an article in the New York Times about hysterectomies, like debunking myths or explaining stuff about hysterectomies. There's a lot of misinformation about them, and just kind of doing that. And they really took off because so many people had those same questions and experiences and needs in terms of their health. So the social media came first, and then just kind of seeing, just the extent of the need out there. And in terms of social media, because like if you make one video on endometriosis, like there is always going to be follow-up questions like, well, can you make one on PCOS? Can you make one on birth control? Can you make one on, abortion? And so the book was also a way to get everything in one place. And so there's chapters on basically everything in gynecology. So all of the conditions we just mentioned, chapter on birth control, chapter on sterilization, hysterectomy, abortion, gender-affirming care, intersex, all the things that also in the news with the politics that people are making laws about, but they don't actually understand. So I wanted to be like
maybe we should send a bug to like the Trump campaign.
Yeah, people send it to like maybe we should mail copies of the book to people who are making rules about stuff they don't understand. But I wanted to be something that people could understand their own bodies, like throughout their whole life, wherever they are in their reproductive health, to find what they need. So if they're trying to get pregnant, want to avoid getting pregnant, just starting their periods, ending their periods, having sex, problems with sex, that they could find the answers there. So it's basically everything except for the actual pregnancy, childbirth stuff, because that's just too much. Like that would be like
that'd be
3 whole books.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Have you ever thought about making something that was more focused, like more teenager focused?
A lot of people have asked me that. Yeah, actually. So it's something I've thought about. There's actually a couple of good books for teenagers by friends of mine who are also gynecologists. So they have very similar names. It's very funny. It's like, we need to talk about vaginas and we need to talk about down there. The vaginas one is Dr. Allison Rogers, who's a fertility specialist. And that one's for younger kids. So it's got like kind of cartoons and like showing like the parts of the body. And then Jen Lincoln, who's huge on TikTok, she's like 3 million followers. Her book is more for like kind of like teens and like maybe college students. So it includes more like sex and like, is this discharge normal, like that sort of stuff. And so, I thought about it, but I was like, oh, their books are so good. So I'll just drop people.
I was listening to the book, and I think something that constantly came up for me was like, how have I not known this my whole life? And I've been on this earth for 33 years, right? But then I think I talk a lot about on the podcast, just like as far as like my sexual experiences, or like when I first got my period, or when I was put on birth control, like there was no really like education on it. It was just like a thing we did, right?
Exactly.
And as I was listening, I was like, wow, like how life-changing could it be for anyone to have this knowledge early on.
Yeah. And so what really it really touches me is when people say that they get it for their kids. So like I got it for my daughter, my nieces, and some people got them for their sons, which I love, because I tell people it's not just a book for women, because there's topics like sex and birth control and how to get pregnant, how to avoid pregnancy that affects everyone. And but it's really moving, especially for people who said that they had struggled, but they didn't want their daughters to face the same struggle. They wanted them to kind of grow up with this knowledge about their body and the empowerment. And so I say at the beginning of the book, I'm like, this is stuff everybody should know. It's like how your body works.
Absolutely.
It's kind of crazy that it's so difficult to learn about it and to know how it works and to know how to take care of it. So some of the videos that I have on social media that are like the most like viral are just literally like basic, like what are the organs? Like I had a video on hysterectomies, and it was like, here are the ovaries, like here's the uterus, here's the rectum, and people were like, what? Because nobody's ever seen their organs in real life. Like they've seen the cartoon of like the T-shaped thing. It doesn't look like that in real life. And so it was very just interesting. People to be like, oh my God, I'm 40 something years old. I've never known what my body parts look like. And
it's nothing to be ashamed about.
Not at all.
Like I think we kind of come to a point where like we understand that there's just like a lack of education and all of these things. And just because we have them, they are internal, right? Like we have no idea.
We don't know.
So I think seeing more videos and more conversations around it also kind of remove the shame around like oh, I didn't know this, and it's okay that I'm learning this now because now I can pass that information on.
Exactly. And that was my other mission with the book too, was also envisioning that it was a way to get conversations going, that people can share it with their friends, their book clubs. We were talking about book clubs earlier, and to kind of to break that stigma of, oh God, like I can't talk about this. I tell people it's like the Emperor's New Clothes. It's like everyone thinks that they're the only one going through something like, oh, like this weird thing with my vagina, or like in my bladder with sex, orgasms. And then when you start talking to people, you're like, oh my God, everyone's going through the same thing. And it's just that everybody had been afraid to share about it. It's the same thing with things like miscarriage. Like it's perceived like, oh my gosh, you have to keep it a secret. But then when you talk to people, so many people have had miscarriages and they just didn't realize it because everyone felt that they had to keep it a secret. So that everybody felt really alone.
Right.
So it was also just to kind of get out there this information so that people could, realize that like we can talk about this. This is like something I can, and I've been really excited to jump in with like different book clubs. Like I'll like zoom in to people's book clubs because I'm like, I want people to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it's so great because like I'll kind of like kick them off with some questions and ideas and thoughts, and then I let them just talk about it amongst themselves. Just be like, get glasses of wine and just share about your experiences. And I think that's really powerful too, to take away that sense of stigma.
Right. And I think the book is just creating space on its own to be right, and have those conversations and kind of lead into conversation.
So I wrote this letter to booksellers and librarians saying that, even if the people in your store, your library, are not coming up to you and specifically asking, like, I need a book about, my bladder, or I need a book about like sexual health problems. I can guarantee you that someone is going through something in this book.
Right.
Like, one of the problems in this book they have faced at some point. And just to have it on the shelf, have it be available when they're browsing and looking for novels, is so exciting, because then they could be like, oh my God, it has everything you should know about your reproductive health, but we're never told. It has a big rainbow vulva on the cover. It's really pretty. And just, if they pick that up and it changes their life, it's amazing. I've gotten so many comments already from people being like, oh my gosh, like, I read your book and that led me to get care for this, that, the other. It helped me find a specialist. And now, it really changed my life. And that's amazing. Like, how much better can that be, like, to just say that even if one person reads your book and it helps them in their life, then that's incredibly powerful. So I've been very, very, very gratified and honored to get the book out there and to be able to have that impact on people.
Yeah, I think that's another reason why I love carrying it here, and we carry some books that are kind of in that same regard, because I think romance bookstores are able to have this kind of like safety space where like people come in and ask for all kinds of things, right? Based on what they like, what they don't like. I had someone come in the other day and ask for a book where the partner talks them through their orgasm, right? You're not walking into
Barnes and Noble.
Right, Barnes and Noble, and asking your bookseller that, right? And so I love having it here for that reason, because I want people to be able to feel safe in asking for those things, because whether you're going through it or somebody who's going through it, right? Like, as I was listening to the book, there were certain things that were coming up, and I was like, oh wait, I know friends who deal with like excruciating pain when they're on their period. I luckily have never experienced it, but it's not normal, right?
Exactly.
And we live in a society that just kind of normalizes it, because like women can just deal with all kinds of pain, and we're just kind of troop on, and it's so validating to be able to say, like, no, there's actually something wrong with me, and like I want to address it.
Exactly. I'm like nodding vigorously for those
right
on the podcast. And so and you just made like 10 excellent points that, one, the normalization of female pain. So pain with periods and pain with sex, I tell people, no, it's not normal. Pain with sex thing is huge. It's sort of just expected that, like, oh, I guess it's gonna hurt a little bit, you just kind of deal with it or relax. And if you're having pain with sex, first of all, that's never normal. There's lots of things we can do to help. It could be something like vaginismus, vulvodynia, pelvic floor dysfunction, endometriosis, like, dryness from perimenopause, menopause. So there's so many things that we can do to help. And also just that safe space, that feeling of, like, it's okay here. Like, coming into a romance bookstore, that everybody's interested in romance and like, like in sex and like, like certain levels of spice. We were talking before the recording of, different spice levels and things, and that they can ask you, they can be like, well, I'm looking for a really spicy book, or I'm looking for this, that, the other. And that they're not going to be judged.
Right.
It's normal. And it's something that, they deserve to to ask a bookseller for a specific
Yeah,
type of book,
yeah.
just like somebody would ask about literary fiction,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Like
And I love too because you guys were in that New York Times article on
Mhm,
romance bookstores, which I
mhm.
loved. I thought that was amazing. I got so many messages about that article because in one of the photographs, my book was in a
Yeah,
picture
yeah.
of the bookshelves, and there was a bookstore in California, and it had all these books about sex. Come as you are. Like there's something called like the Big Orgasm. It was just incredible because there's so many of these sexual health books all
Mhm,
together, and that it wasn't just just novels. It was just
mhm.
about like empowering people to embrace their sexuality in all sorts of different
Right.
ways. So I thought that was fantastic. It was great.
Yeah. What are some of the most common misconceptions
Ah,
about reproductive health?
yeah. So the pain one is a huge
Mhm.
one because like everyone has bad pain with their periods, everyone has pain with sex, everyone has horrible menopause symptoms, and with the dot dot dot, so you should just deal with it. That's probably my
Mm,
biggest pet peeve. I need to make like t-shirts that say no, the pain is not normal or something
right.
like that. Because that just leads to people suffering for so long unnecessarily. I give the example of my husband just recently, like, injured his hip and he had like a pinched nerve. He
Hmm.
could tell everyone in the world. He's like, he could tell his boss, his coworkers, oh, I hurt my hip, I have a pinched nerve, I'm gonna go to my primary care, I'm gonna go to the physical therapist, I'm gonna get some medication for it.
Right.
Done. Like,
Right.
just the expectation is that that's not normal. You need treatment. But for women, they could be like, "Oh, I'm in debilitating pain and I can't work and I'm throwing up like a week out of every month." And they're like, "Well, that's just normal," and which is not acceptable.
Right.
And then, so that's my biggest one.
Hmm.
And I have so many for like sex that like I don't know if you've seen any of the videos on I've done for TikTok. Like there's this one that will not die, which is that like that your vagina gets stretched out if you had more partners. Like
Oh
I don't know,
my
that one keeps
gosh.
coming up over and over and over again. And I say every single time I'm like, it's not taking attendance. So like I can't tell if it's like one partner 100 times or 100 partners one time. I'm like, how would it know? Like there was even a
You should put
woman,
that on a t-shirt.
right?
Your vagina
Vagina's not
is
taking
not taking
attendance. But
attendance.
there was even like a woman who was like some sort of like she presented herself as like an academic, like she was like on like at a whiteboard and like talking about like partners and she drew a graph and I'm
Mhm,
like, what are you smoking? Like it was just so bizarre because she was just trying to like kind of like make it sciencey. And I'm like, that's like
mhm,
there's no science to this. It's just like misogyny. And so um
mhm.
yeah, so that one I hate. A similar one, I think. Somebody made one of those women in male fields version of it. It was like a man's penis gets smaller the more like partners he's had is getting compressed. I mean, like so it's like the same idea. I'm like, really? Yeah, no.
I
So
love that.
anyway, I thought that was pretty funny. So those are probably my two biggest ones. But
What has been the most like surprising feedback that you have gotten from people who have read your book or are just like in touch with you through social media?
I don't have feedback. I'm trying to think. There's a lot of people who kind of ask the like, well, what do I do now?
Mm,
How do I get help? Like, how do I find a doctor? And that's where I wish I had a better system where you can fix the medical system.
mm.
Obviously with everything that's happened with the United Health CEO, like clearly everyone
Okay,
is not, oh my God.
that is
Yeah, there's a lot.
insane. The
Yeah,
threads are going crazy. I
it's
don't know if you
crazy. Yep.
all that are you all familiar with the no. Okay, so the United what is
Yeah, the
the
CEO
CEO
of
was
United
murdered.
Health, which is like one of the biggest like insurance companies
Yeah.
and notorious for being a terrible insurance company. They basically deny all claims. Like
Yeah.
that's just their business model is to make doctors and patients fight to get care
Yeah.
because they just assume that people will just give up and they won't have to pay for it.
Mm.
So truly, like every doctor, every healthcare administrator knows this, that they're notorious that like they had billions and like I don't know, Andrew, if you know, but how many billions of dollars in profit just squeezing the hell out of like the people who are using their insurance, and like people have had like chemotherapy denied, like treatment for
Wow.
like like serious medical conditions, like medically necessary surgeries and medications. And a lot of doctors don't accept United because of that. And so the CEO was assassinated, basically like a planned hit.
Yeah.
And the crazy thing is obviously murder is wrong. Nobody should ever get murdered, but the
Absolutely.
response is really startling because people basically all shared their experience about how horrible United had treated them. Basically, they were like, United is murderers because like they have probably
Right.
led to someone's death by
Yeah.
denying necessary care. And the fact that you know, like that more people are celebrating than are feeling bad, I think is
Yeah.
really showing how broken
Telling.
the system is.
Right, right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. Like,
so,
obviously, like,
yeah.
a man was murdered,
Mhm.
however, comma, like, the way that the response has been, I mean, Threads has been,
Like people are like posting like thirst tweets and stuff
well,
because like
yeah, because the
assassin
guy,
is kind of attractive, and so they're like,
yeah, and
he's like Robin.
he like only pulled down his mask to like flirt
Flirt with
with like the
someone.
hotel like receptionist. So people are like, oh, this is like the romance.
He's like a
Like the
charming,
and
like,
I'm
so
like,
people
oh
have
my
said like
God.
they're like romance authors, get on it.
Yeah,
They're like
we're
the
losing the
charming
plot.
vigilante who's like
Yeah,
an assassin, but he's
basically.
got a heart of gold. Like, you know, so people were literally turning this into like a romance novel plot. Which again, like just to say, this is obviously not right, but it's just an interesting kind of phenomenon just to
Right.
show how, you know, and then I will say that you know, I actually this year, like I went out of network with insurances. Is women's health is notoriously bad. They don't
Mhm.
pay for jack. Like, you know, in my specialty in endometriosis, like they will, you know, pay us like 1/10 the amount that they pay for male surgeons of, you know, specialties
Wow.
that are male dominated. It's actually well known that for anything in gynecology, the equivalent in urology with men's health
Hmm.
pays more. So by a lot, like sometimes. So
Wow.
things like, you know, like a tubal ligation versus a vasectomy. Vasectomy takes like a few minutes in the office. Tubal ligation's under general anesthesia. You had need OR. You're making incisions in someone's abdomen. Like the reimbursement is much less for the women, just by nature of it being a women's health thing. So my urologist friends will be like, "What? That's crazy." So a lot of us who are GYN surgeons in private practice actually go out of network because we're just like we just can't function in the system
Right.
anymore. Like you can't keep the doors open.
Yeah.
So you know, people recently with like another health insurance, like Anthem Blue Cross in New England, where they were going to not pay for anesthesia past a certain amount of time. Just to be like, oh, well, you know, like once you've gone over that time, sorry, you don't get paid. And so people, there's a huge uproar about that.
Wow.
But there wasn't a similar uproar at all. The fact that, like I said, if we operate on someone for like 5 hours, like
Mhm.
we'll still get paid like nothing, and they don't, you know. So I'm gonna make a video about that too because a lot of people I think don't realize how bad it is for women's health,
Yeah.
and that there's like kind of these built-in kind of inequities that, you know, like make it so that like OBGYNs burn out faster. There's a lot of, you know, people
Mm.
leaving OBGYN, like people are hospitals are closing labor and delivery units because they're losing money because they get reimbursed so little. And so, you know, it just sets up women's health to
Yeah.
be like much worse than other aspects of health. So, like I said, there's a whole, like, there's, again, in the history chapter, it kind of touches on all these systems problems too.
Mm.
So it's not just that, like, oh, there may be individual doctors who maybe don't get it. It's like the whole system is kind of broken. And so, it's
Yeah.
very broken. Yeah.
What what is something that I guess is more stigmatized in reproductive health when it comes to women of color?
Oh, so much. And so, women of color, there's a lot of inequities. Stigma, I'm not sure. Well, we'll kind of get to stigma in a second, but in terms of pain, in terms of pain being taken seriously, it's actually well documented in studies that, you know, Black women and Black patients in general are less likely to be offered pain medication for things that are like objectively painful, like
Right.
broken bones or, you
Right.
know, appendicitis. And then Black women are less likely to be offered minimally invasive treatments for things like, you know, like fibroids. Like they're more likely to be told to have a hysterectomy, you know, if they want to preserve fertility.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of these issues. And in the book, actually, in different parts, I kind of talk about some of these like kind of racial inequalities. Like and sometimes like it's not clear kind of where they come from. But so for instance, like fibroids, like, you know, more likely to be found in Black women. I was pointing out there was one thing that I was, you know, learning about when I was writing this that kind of surprised me, which is like the impact of things like hair relaxers. So the chemicals in those are some of them are oh, what's the word called, they work on kind of hormone receptors, so they can
Hmm.
actually you know, cause things like breast cancer, uterine cancer, and fibroids.
Wow.
So they were saying sort of there is potentially the societal pressures to have a certain like kind
So,
of
right.
westernized ideal of beauty with
Yeah.
straight hair has then led people to use these chemicals that have then caused potentially harm.
Mm.
So it's again, it's not like maybe like a direct kind of
Right.
thing, but you know,
Right.
just those built-in
Yeah.
biases and stuff kind of lead to health inequalities and stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah. There's a whole lot. Once,
That's
you know,
yeah,
there's a
that's
million
yeah.
things that like
I had
need more research, but
absolutely. I
yeah.
had learned some of it through the courses I'm taking,
Yeah.
specifically when it comes to like Black people
Yeah.
and when it came to like giving them any kind of like pain medications,
Hmm.
because there was also this like stigma of like them being addicts, right?
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
like they
Drug
wouldn't want to
seeking.
give
Yeah.
them right,
Hmm.
which like was wild, but it's very much affecting us
Yeah.
in every day. Um, I feel like post election, but really throughout the year, right, with like all of these laws in different states, especially when it comes to women's health care, and abortions, there has been like more and more people, women trying to figure out like, what do I do?
Yeah.
How do I take care of myself?
Especially in states
Do
like Florida. Yeah.
right, do
Yeah.
I just, like have surgery and like
Hmm.
remove everything?
Hmm.
What has been kind of your like take on that, like the surgeons, I guess, of like
Yeah.
all of these conversations?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So, first of all, after Roe was overturned and also after the election, we had just huge, huge upsurges in the number of people coming in for sterilization, for getting tubals and vasectomies. I was seeing news articles about that too. But definitely more women coming in for tubals. And part of that was through, there are like child-free groups, like there's a child-free Reddit. There was a woman on TikTok who put together a list of GYNs who will do sterilizations for people
Mm-hmm.
who are child-free because people were really struggling to get, tubals if they were child free. Back to our, women in male fields thing. Um, and so people were traveling across state lines, like definitely more after Roe. Like I was seeing people from, I'm outside Philadelphia. I was seeing people from like West Virginia, Virginia. Somebody came up from Florida because they were really scared. And it's tough to kind of tell people what to do because we don't kind of know what's going to happen. I mean, I point out the example of, RFK and putting people in charge of the FDA, like that impacts the access to like the medical abortion pill
Right.
and IUDs and birth control. There's some people who think that IUDs and Plan B, which is emergency birth control, are abortifacients. They think they cause abortions. They don't.
Mm.
But, as we've seen with things like the IVF discussion, it almost doesn't matter what the science is. Like if
Right.
some judge or a politician thinks something, they can kind of create a law or enforce a rule, even if it isn't real. And um, that's a legitimate fear about access to IUDs and emergency birth control and medical abortion
Yeah.
pills. So it is tough. Like we say, for now, nothing has changed. And one of the good things about government working really slowly is that nothing is going to change quickly.
Right.
So hopefully it's something that, God forbid, hopefully it won't happen because we survived one prior Trump administration without all these things getting taken away. But, if something were to put access to IUDs and things like that at threat, at least hopefully we'd have some sort of advance notice. That being said, if long-acting birth control or sterilization is something that you want, please go see your gynecologist. We are all very, very, very happy to help you with that. Some of the IUDs last for 8 to 10 years.
Mm.
And we hopefully would not lose access to medically necessary birth control because we use it for things like painful periods, PCOS, and
Right. I
PMDD,
mean,
that
you
sort of
even use
thing.
it for acne.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. You use it for acne. So hopefully they would never take it away completely because there's medical indications. I mean, who knows what happens, but
Right.
hopefully it wouldn't be like the entire class of birth control would just get taken out.
Yeah.
So it is something that for now, like no one should kind of panic. But if it's something that you are wanting, just go see your doctor because why wait?
Right.
Yeah.
Um, to that, I'm part of like some like Facebook groups that are like women focused basically, and there have been a lot of conversations in there about like, here's a list of OBGYNs who will
Mhm.
like do the surgery for
Yeah.
you.
Mhm.
So what, I guess like what can women expect if they're going in and saying, yes, I do not want to have children.
Yeah.
I want to be child free.
Mhm.
What kind of things are they coming up against where a doctor might like be like, no, you're too young, or
Yeah.
no, like, do you want to think about it?
Yeah, it's mostly if people are in their 20s or if they haven't had children before. So,
Mm.
but I've had patients who are like in their 30s and 40s who have children who have been told no because they're like, well, I've heard the craziest things. Like they were told you need to have at least 3 children or you need to have a boy and a girl. So again, just like all these like assumptions. Or like,
Oh my
what is
God.
normal for a family that if you don't meet this, like, one boy, one girl, like, norm, that somehow
Right.
you're going to regret it. So, I tell people, like, it's mostly for those who are child free because there are people who regret sterilizations, and nowadays we do them by taking the tube out entirely. So there's no way to reverse it like a vasectomy.
Right.
So you have to really be sure. But we tell people, I mean, you could do IVF if you wanted to. If you truly changed your mind in the future, you could do IVF. I actually gave a talk in Seattle to an OBGYN society about this concept of regret because it is so, so strong in the sterilization and hysterectomy discussions.
Mm-hmm.
It is not at all an issue for any other type of surgery. So, for instance, like, if you go any surgery you could regret, like any medical procedure you could regret.
Right.
But, people don't get battered over the head with this possibility of regret like they do for women's reproductive, kind of decisions. So I actually was like, I'm just curious, what is the rate of regret of other surgeries? And I put it up on the slide because for things like bariatric surgery, knee replacement, spine surgery, the risk of regret was way higher. I
Oh,
put the risk
really?
of regret for people who are in their 20s,
Mhm.
and it was like maybe like 15% or something like that. And then for the other surgeries, it was like up to like 30-40%. Some of those surgeries have complications. And
Right.
so, just to kind of point out, but not a single one of the patients going in for knee surgery is going to be told, well, but you might regret it, so you just didn't do it.
Mm.
Like, no one's going to say that. Like, the assumption is you came in to have a discussion about surgical options. You kind of know you could choose or you might not. This sort of like, you don't know your own mind, you're going to regret it later, is
Right.
only really applied to women. Apparently, like in my vasectomy video, like a bunch of men said that yes, they were told you will regret it, but definitely not to the extent that women are told. And again, I think it goes to, there's this assumption of like motherhood, of like, you will always want to be a mother even if you don't think you do right now,
Mm.
or that if your future husband wants to have kids, that you will somehow like harmed him. Um, so, like I said, it's just treated so differently than other aspects of care. And I say you could regret anything, what job you take, who you
Right.
marry, where you live, but we don't say you can't make that decision. So this is why it's a little sad that you have to go to kind of these lists. Fortunately, one of the lists with the gynecologist has at least like 2,000 doctors on it. So
Oh,
fortunately,
okay.
it's not like a rare thing.
Right.
But it is sad that there are some places that people are like, oh, I had
Yeah.
to search for a doctor to take me seriously.
Yeah.
We always have to, so whenever, if somebody out there is interested in sterilization, we always have to mention regret, alternatives like vasectomy, reversible birth control. But that's it. Like, that's all we're supposed to do. We're not supposed to like then be like, oh, well, now you should just do one of those instead. But we have to have at least mentioned, the risk, including risk of regret and the alternatives. But that's just for any surgery.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. For readers who may feel dismissed or unheard by their doctors, what advice would you give them to advocate for themselves?
Yeah, and that's actually one of the last chapters in the book is about, what do you do? Like, how do you have this conversation with your doctor? So, like, one of the first things to try is, whenever you're seeing a doctor and they're evaluating something, it should never just be that they're just like, I have nothing for you. Like, that's it. There's no, further steps, testing, treatment options. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
never that way.
Mm.
There's always something you can do. So you can say, like, what can we do next? Like, what is there some testing we can do? Can I try certain things? Or if you are not an expert in this, or you feel like it needs a different type of doctor, can you refer me to someone? They should be doing something.
Okay.
So if they're literally giving you absolutely nothing, that's where you get another opinion. That's where you see another doctor. And this is where like kind of crowdsourcing through social media is helpful. So, people have found each other online in these communities, child-free groups, endometriosis groups, fertility groups, and they kind of, will share like, oh, these are the doctors we had good experiences with. Sometimes we'll make a like literally a directory, like a
Right.
list like the child-free groups have. The for gender affirming care, I have a lot of trans
Mm.
patients, like so similarly, they have like kind of groups and they discuss like, doctors who they
Yeah.
recommend. So sometimes it takes a little bit of legwork to kind of find a doctor. You might need to see a specialist. So for instance, like a menopause specialist, fertility specialist, pelvic pain specialist, to kind of get the care you need. If, seeing a general doctor, sometimes you might not kind of get exactly, as much, detailed care. So, but like you can kind of push them a little bit, be like, what do you think is going on? Like, we call it differential diagnosis, which is basically our list of things that it could be.
Okay.
So, what are your thoughts? What's your differential? What could be going on? What can we do next? Like, there should always be more of the conversation. So hopefully your doctor will be responsive to that and then help point you in the right direction.
Okay.
Yeah. or find a different doctor.
And to close out, before we ask the audience for some questions, what steps do you think we can take um to break the stigma around discussing just reproductive health?
Yeah, well, just things like this, even, to have these conversations, to like to not be afraid to kind of talk or share. And obviously I tell people everybody has their own threshold for what they feel comfortable with. This is not to say that everyone should go and like announce everything to everybody. Obviously we all have our personal boundaries that, it's important
Right.
to maintain. But just to say that it's not something you should feel ashamed about, that, just like my husband's example with the hip, like imagine somebody was getting treatment for diabetes or for asthma, for hip pain. Why would they feel embarrassed to say that? Like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's nothing shameful. It's just that's their health.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing with sexual health. Everyone, not everyone, like obviously people are asexual, but like, but most people are sexual beings, and
Mhm.
most people have reproductive organs that may or may not be functioning as they should.
Right.
And, you deserve care for that. You deserve to, be respected in what you're going through, and to, not feel like it's a secret or it's something like dirty or embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
It is what it is. I tell people, vagina is like an elbow. It's just a body part. And so the fact that we treat it so differently,
All right.
like it's like this dirty thing we shouldn't even mention.
Yeah.
We can't even spell it in social media posts because it'll get censored because it's like pornographic. I mean,
Right.
come on. And
Yeah.
so just kind of reclaiming it, just like you said, just normalizing it,
Mhm.
like, and encouraging people, like if they do share it, just be like, oh wow, and kind of to support them in that, and maybe like kind of share your own
Mhm.
experience. And I've been amazed, like people in social media spaces have been more vocal about these things, and then they'll see a lot of these videos will go viral, and you'll see hundreds, thousands of people
Mhm.
going through the exact same thing, and they'll say, oh, I thought I was the only one.
Right.
I'll tell you, one of the most unexpectedly viral videos I had was about something called decidual casts, which is literally where the lining of your uterus sloughs in one piece instead of coming out in bits, and it comes out looking like a big blob, and it hurts a lot when it comes out. And we had kind of thought of it as kind of like a rare thing, but there's a couple of these videos that were viral, and then I responded to it. My video went viral, and like thousands and thousands of people were saying I had that. It scared the shit out of me, and I didn't know what it was. I thought I was having a miscarriage. And just something like that, where they're like, oh, this
Mhm.
crazy thing fell out of my body, but I was so scared, but I couldn't tell anyone because what even was that? So just it felt so sad because I was
Right.
like, all these women just quietly in pain, wondering what was going on,
Right.
and they just felt too embarrassed to share about it. It really kind of made me think, and so I think just even like those little things, those little stories, like
Mhm.
it could be something that maybe someone else will see and be like, wow, I didn't realize other people were going through that,
Yeah.
going through that too. Or just even your friends. It doesn't have to be like the whole world, but
Right.
a friend, a sister, a relative, just kind of like sharing amongst each other is so
Mhm.
important. Um, Sometimes like these discussions get really depressing. And so like we have like this moment where like all of health is terrible. But I always kind of like to end on a positive note, which I love that you brought this up. And so I was kind of say, we all have a sphere of influence. Like we all have somebody that we could be an example for. We can make a positive change in the world for. So that could be our family members, our kids, our relatives, our community, our workplace, our coworkers. If you are a leader in your field, you could, make a difference. So just kind of think to yourself, like, how could my story and my background and experience and expertise maybe make that positive difference out there. So, sometimes it's just as easy as just kind of sharing your story.
I love that.
Yeah.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, so everything is at Karen Tang MD. So mostly on Instagram, also TikTok, YouTube, and Threads. And I just started, what's it called? Blue Sky, Blue Sky,
Yeah,
whatever.
Blue Sky.
But I don't know how to use that because it's,
Yeah.
I was like, who's here? Hello. But if you just go to karentangmd.com, you can link to everything. So, the all the social media, my medical practice. If anybody's listening in your, drivable distance to Pennsylvania, come see me out there.
Mhm.
So you can find information on my practice and also information on the book. Obviously, please support your local indie bookstore. So It's Not Hysteria, Everything You Need to Know About Your Reproductive Health But Never Told. Come to Steamy Lit if you're in Florida.
Thank you.
But if you're not in Florida, just ask for it at your local indie bookstore. That obviously helps get word out to everybody else.
I love that. And one last question. Is there another project coming up that we should be on the lookout for?
I'm trying to kind of figure out what the next book is going to be. And then for now, because I was so kind of focused on book tour stuff that now I'm like, oh, getting back to my medical practice. And
Right.
so I'm like, oh yeah, I should be, a doctor again. I
Yeah.
never gave up practicing, but I was kind of like my schedule cut down,
Right.
way down while I was doing all this
Yeah.
traveling. But yeah, again, I have people from all over the place. I have people from Florida. So come on up
I
if you
love
want to take a
that.
nice trip to
Yeah.
beautiful Pennsylvania. We're right near the King of Prussia Mall, which is one of the biggest malls in the country. So people come up, they go shopping, they like go back home.
Yeah.
Um, I hope to connect with some of you.
I love that.
Yeah,
Did you all have any questions?
I have one.
Okay.
yeah, go for it.
I when I was thinking about having kids, I don't have any. I read What to Expect When
Mhm.
You're
Expecting.
no,
Oh,
it's the one before that, when you're like thinking about expecting
oh,
Mm.
okay.
something. There's one like that. And I found it really interesting in that book they talk about a lot of the hormonal like changes that you go through when you get pregnant
Mhm,
and how those hormones change kind of like your brain chemistry,
mhm,
which is part of nature,
mhm,
um, to kind I don't know, prepare you for all the things you're gonna have to deal with. And in the whole pro life, pro choice discussion, I find it really interesting that that doesn't come up more. Like,
Mhm.
I had a friend that said, a Facebook friend, not a real
Yeah.
life friend, um, that was talking about, like, why can't you just give your baby up for adoption instead of killing it? And I
oh my
made a
gosh.
comment
Mhm,
on her. I mean, she said it probably not that
mhm,
crass, but um, I commented, like, did you know that when you're pregnant, even in the first trimester, like your brain chemistry changes and it never goes back.
Mm.
So you're asking someone to forever change their body
mhm,
just to give a baby away
mhm.
rather than making this choice that will be better for them overall in the long run. And she actually deleted the post. She
No,
never replied to me,
oh,
but she
but it made her
deleted it.
think. That's good.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on how we can kind of use some more of that factual information, not just about like physicality with
Mhm,
pregnancies and physical changes, but actual
mhm.
body chemistry changes to help fight the good fight
Yeah.
for
Well, I
pro
would even say,
choice.
like, just the bigger picture is like pregnancy can change everything. So, like, we say a lot, it's not a health neutral event. Like, people kind of make it seem like just like, oh, a baby just like will appear and birth itself. And we have like a maternal mortality crisis because pregnancy can kill you.
Right.
Like that, clearly we've seen like, you can have like severe complications that are dangerous. And so, just the idea that, well, it's just so simple to just like, oh, just give birth. Like, it's same thing with like when in cases like rape and incest. Like there's some people who are like, oh, it's like this wonderful thing. There's like 11-year-old is going to be giving birth. No, like that's
Right.
very dangerous. Like their body is not prepared for the stresses of pregnancy. So a lot of that, just kind of even like the bigger picture of this is something that is, potentially life-threatening. There's this sort of whole like kind of spot on the internet where they're like just pregnancy like it's so natural and your body knows how to do it, but I'm like women do die. Like it's not just like again that it's oh like beautiful like there's music playing and it's like so angelic. Like having done OB for 4 years of residency, like there's some scary stuff that happens. So again, it's not to kind of beat people over the head, but to counteract that argument of, oh, it's so simple, you would just adopt, like, or give up for adoption is like, well, there's a lot that your body goes through. Yeah, like, in your brain chemistry, like your physical body. Pregnancy affects every organ system. So every part of your body, like your lungs, like your GI system, your muscles, your nerves, and then some of it sometimes like permanently. And so just to say that is so simple, it's not. So but that's a very good point that you made.
It's also insane that like if men were the ones who were giving birth, who
Mm.
it was like normalized for, we wouldn't
Oh.
have a population first of all because like so it's
I've seen some funny TikToks where they're like, if men got pregnant, like, they're just like, oh, like the abortion drive-through, be like, just like, I'm here for my abortion. All right, here you go. And like, here's a free abortion, the buy one, get one free. Like, it's some very funny, like, just again, the same joke of like,
right,
oh, would you expect men to like potentially like put their life in danger?
right,
No, anyway. But the other point too is that, when you first mentioned that, my first response was like, oh, we just know so little about what happens to the brain, and like they would just have very little research on these things. So I mentioned in the book in several of the chapters, there's so many things that we just don't know, even basic stuff like what causes fibroids or endometriosis. We just don't know. Even though these affect, like fibroids affect up to 80% of Black women, 70% of white women, we don't know where they come from. Like we don't know the science of it, so then we can't like kind of adequately like prevent them and things. So just stuff like this, like the basics of like what happens to your body and certain things, like we're still learning that in menopause. That's come up a lot about like menopause brain. It's a new book that just came out. All the different ways that your brain changes in menopause and the hormone receptors and things like that. Again, because it was sort of thought that it wasn't important. It wasn't like as necessary, for medical research as diabetes or Crohn's disease, even though, again, menopause happens to half of women. So, but yeah, when you made that point, I'm like, oh, I don't exactly know what happens to the brain.
I don't want to take a lot of time from other people, but my other thought about why we don't talk about that so much is also because of the stigma of women being in the workplace. They already have such a hard time being viewed equally as men. And then it's like there's this biological reason why you change after you have a baby, or even like with menopause, which I'm starting to learn about as well. I started thinking like I've never had a kid and I feel like I have mommy brain, like, which I know we say mommy brain as a joke, but after reading that book, I realized like it is a real thing. We probably shouldn't call it that, but
yeah, like brain fog and
also
perimenopause. Yeah,
some of that aspect of why we don't talk about it, because we don't want to
be seen as weak,
hinder
right? Yeah,
ourselves.
yeah.
But it's a shame because then there's so many things that we don't know about our own body, and like knowing that about the brain chemistry thing definitely changed how I, as a child-free woman, am more supportive, like actively, outwardly supportive of pregnant women in the workplace that I work with, and supporting them when they come back to work, because I know, things have changed for them. They're not just coming back to work and they're back to the person that they were before.
That's a great point. Yeah.
I really love that because I feel like so often, even within, right, like women, like someone leaves for work or someone gets pregnant and is not the same person, right? And we don't acknowledge any of that. We're just like, okay, she had a baby, she's back. Like, what is the holdup, right? Without realizing that there's like all of these things that somebody's body goes through. But again, right, like society just normalized this pregnancy and giving birth as like a walk in the park that
like body is like just wrecked. Like,
right.
Not to scare anybody out there who wants to be pregnant, but just, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of stress on your body and your mind. Yeah.
I think menopause is like this new boom that I'm so glad that we are getting to that age and we're so vocal and now the news is spreading.
Yeah.
So I recently learned why is the brain fog is because of the estrogen receptors in the brain, and women have more estrogen receptors in the brain. So when your hormones go down or your estradiol receptors are not receiving the estrogen, that is why you're forgetful. It's not your fault. You're not hysterical,
right? Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
It's actual hormones that decrease.
Yeah.
But if a heartbeat decreases in an old white male, and they drop dead, like
Right.
the ambulance will
Right.
be there.
Right.
But for
Right.
us, because we were never studied and we've never understood the physiology, but now we are learning and we are loud and vocal.
I love it.
We will be.
Yeah.
So I think menopause is one of those things that you'll always be menopausal.
Yeah.
Forever.
And perimenopause, like my mom had never heard of perimenopause.
Oh, yeah,
I told her I'm probably going into perimenopause now. She's like, that's not, what is that? That's not a thing. I'm like, yes,
it is.
And it can start in the 30s, and you didn't
know.
Yeah,
right.
So, and I started like probably around 35 or so, feeling like my brain is not my brain anymore.
And so it's interesting. I did my residency from 2005 to 9, and we got very little teaching about menopause, perimenopause. And at the time, though, we only focused on like, hot flashes, night sweats, and vaginal dryness. That was like it. But now when I see a lot of women for perimenopause, menopause now, and like some of their biggest concerns are like brain fog and sleep. So they can't sleep. They're like waking up in the night and then they can't focus. They are like forgetful. Like they can't kind of, keep attention at work. And so it's interesting because again, like those are the kind of things that like people like hot flashes and night sweats, people will be like, okay, I know that that's perimenopause or menopause, but like this, I just can't like remember what I was doing. Like
Those
they feel like it's a fault as opposed to a medical thing. And so now because people know about it, they're like, oh my God, I need to go see the doctor because like I just, can't. And the hormone replacement therapy is great for that. I've had patients be like, bam, like right, we try some, HRT and they're like, my focus is back, sleep is good, like,
But
it's
to
very
that,
effective. Yeah.
sorry, but to that point, I went to my gynecologist and said, I think, I have some symptoms from what I've seen
Mhm.
of perimenopause. And she's like, you're on birth control. There's no way you'll ever even know if you're in perimenopause. You won't get the symptoms, which
Yeah.
obviously is
You
not
do,
true
yeah,
because
yeah,
I've experienced
yeah,
that.
You
exactly.
gotta seek another
Yeah, see another
doctor.
doctor. Yeah,
No, I
And
know that.
unfortunately, nobody taught us. And when we went through med school,
yeah,
there was not big chapter on menopause or perimenopause.
yeah.
So now the new movement of OBGYNs that are actually being vocal and saying, I was the worst menopause doctor because I didn't know, but
Yeah.
I did my own understanding and digging out. Now so much
Yeah.
that can be done with the new gynecologists that have learned. And I'm sure that the more they learn and the more OBGs understand, HRT too, it was so like, oh my God, it's going
It's
to
give
do
you breast
so much
cancer. Yeah, yeah,
worse.
yeah.
No, it was
Yeah.
not never studied correctly.
Mhm.
And now that it's studied, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
here you go.
Yeah, it actually like helps with heart disease in a certain age group and doesn't increase it. So yeah, it's definitely there's a lot of misinformation out there perpetuated even on doctors. So, like the idea that you can't be in perimenopause in your 30s, that, if you're on birth control, you're not gonna be able to tell, like, there's a lot of these things. It's just like the myth about like, you should get pregnant to treat endometriosis. Like doctors still say that, which is crazy.
Wow.
But yeah, but there is now a movement to kind of change all this, which is great. And so it does take, I'm 45, like it took kind of Gen X and millennial women to kind of be going through perimenopause, be like, this is effed, like we
Right.
can't, this is crazy. So you had your Halle Berrys and
Yeah.
like, everybody like Drew Barrymore be like, what is going on? Like, why aren't we talking about this? We deserve to be treated better. It is very exciting because I think we are sort of like in this forefront of
Yeah.
mobilizing and pushing for better. So it's good.
Did anyone have any other questions?
Do it. Yeah.
Well, I am 32 and menopause is like so on my radar for some reason. I think because of what you're
Everyone's
saying,
talking
like,
about it.
people
Yeah.
are talking about it,
Yeah.
and it's good to know. And my friend here is like a pelvic floor specialist, and
Yay.
I'm like,
I
oh,
sent
this-
everyone for pelvic PT. Yeah, she's got a, was it called?
Oh,
Ah, yay. Yes, yes. PT and OT. That's right.
And your logo?
Nice.
So these things are coming into my awareness. Like I should be aware of my pelvic floor health. Like before, I don't have any kids, but I do want to, and like learning from her and then learning more about menopause. So I guess my question is, those two things are highly on my radar. I feel like prevention is better than intervention.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
as someone in their 30s, what should be on my radar for preventative women's health?
Yeah, that's great. I love that. And so, a couple of things, one, the pelvic floor thing, because I think everyone should know about their pelvic floor. In some countries, like France, they actually send everyone for pelvic physical therapy after they give birth because they're just like, this is just part of taking care of yourself. But just learning about it is important because, like, a lot of people, when I mention pelvic floor stuff, they're like, what is that? They don't realize that there are muscles even. So just like learning about it, like learning about how to avoid like kind of, actually you guys can probably talk, but things like little things, actually this is a fun like, thing of misinformation is like hovering at public toilets can make you spasm your pelvic floor. It can cause like pain and bladder dysfunction. So there's these random things that just if you just kind of like knew about it and learned about it, you could avoid like causing issues. So in terms of fertility, so a couple of things that if you are like planning future fertility, but kind of not for a while, you may want to look into like egg freezing. Just obviously like egg quality and number do kind of go down over time. There's a whole chapter in the book about like kind of just like fertility and pregnancy. And so, if you know it's going to be a long time before you're trying to conceive because of work or, like relationship or whatever, something like egg freezing can help to kind of optimize your fertility, sort of, like freeze it in time, until you're ready to try and get pregnant. And then also just kind of taking care of your general health. So we talk a lot in the book about, like nutrition and like kind of, watching like, like protein and like exercise, strength training, all these things. Because like we mentioned, pregnancy is very stressful. So making sure, heart health and like, musculoskeletal health, pelvic floor is all as kind of as good as it can be. So that's great. And I love the idea of people being proactive. So I have people come in their early 40s or whatever, and they're not in perimenopause, but they're like, I just want to be prepared. So then we just talk about it. We just kind of talk about, like what to look out for, what symptoms to kind of come in if you're starting to get them, so we can kind of nip them in the bud. Like we talk about the changes in your body with perimenopause, like, you're going to like potentially lose muscle mass, like you're gonna have some sleep issues, like here's how we can kind of counteract that or prevent it. So if you're thinking about future fertility too, just, to talk to your OBGYN, you do called a preconception consult, even if it's not like in the near future, but just to do this, like kind of talk about, making sure up to date on vaccines and like testing your pap smear and all of that, just to kind of be as healthy as you can be. So there's a book on cancer there too. It's not about like every cancer, but it's about like cancer screenings, like mammograms and pap smears and all of that stuff. So great question.
Is this might not be true, but is it true that if you're lifting heavy, that affects your pelvic floor muscle?
It can. And so I've had a couple patients actually who hadn't had children, but had a little bit of pelvic organ prolapse because they either were like weightlifters or their job, like they work for like UPS and were like lifting heavy packages. So, heavy lifting can weaken your pelvic floor. But again, this is where our pelvic specialists can help to train and kind of strengthen and to counteract that. So obviously we don't want people to stop lifting just because of that. So, if you are somebody who's, doing a lot of lifting, you're working on your strength training, and you're starting to feel like some bulging or like maybe like you can't fully empty your bladder, you have to strain to have a bowel movement, see your gynecologist, ask to get a referral to pelvic PT or OT to get evaluated and to kind of help with strengthening the pelvic floor. Yeah, and also people with like either Stanlos, like kind of like the we call connective tissue disorders, where their kind of tissue is very weak, so also more at risk, especially with things like lifting, chronic cough, like that sort of thing. So.
I'm fully asking because we lift so many book
Oh,
boxes. And it's something that my mom, but like I take everything my mom says with like a grain of salt because she also is like 70 and there's like a lot of old things that she knows. But she was like, and like we have a team that's all women, and so she was like, you guys have to stop lifting so heavy. And I was like, how do you
do
I
that?
can't. So she was like, you need to find help, like you need to do something because you're gonna ruin your pelvic muscle. And I was like, I don't even have time to like engage in this conversation right now because like the dogs aren't gonna do it, like
Right.
so we have to do it. But that's great to know because then maybe we could like just do some more research for just the team in general because I want everyone's pelvic floor muscle to be healthy.
Oh, you guys can do something together. Like I was going to say, you can have like a pelvic health event or something.
We should definitely talk.
You should do like a community event, like a pelvic health awareness, like
doing a workshop in Del Rey.
There you
okay.
go.
Okay, we'll talk.
Look at that. I love this. I love the networking
it.
that happens sometimes in these events. It's so fabulous. It's like, like referrals. Like, are you OB/GYN? I can't remember if you're, I can't remember what specialty.
I'm a scientist.
Oh, you're a scientist. Okay, yeah.
Love it.
Yes. But I've had events too where I had like, OB/GYNs who then connected with pelvic, like pelvic, physical therapists or like mental health professionals. And it's so lovely to kind of see everybody like connecting together and stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the whole point of these is just to ask the questions that you just want asked.
Yeah.
Like just, so ask away. I love it.
Would you say the best way to like proactively, I guess, not to say like not get acne or help with pregnancy or menopause or whatever, is what you eat and basically what you eat?
Yeah, so nutrition is huge. It's obviously a lot more important than I think that we had realized. Back you're a few years behind me in medical school, but we learned like nothing about nutrition, like very little. And now we're like, again, we all had to kind of educate ourselves, being like, okay, like fiber and protein, like magnesium, like like omega 3s, like all the vitamin D is huge. So it is something that I actually just sent in updates for the paperback version of the book, and I did so much more about nutrition, especially in perimenopause. I put a whole bunch of, yeah, like magnesium, vitamin D, like all of the macronutrient stuff. So for weight management is probably the most important thing. More so, you know, obviously exercise is important, but it's actually more influential than exercise. And then there are a lot of things that like say like vitamin D deficiencies can put you at risk for a lot of stuff, for fibroids, like random things. And so yeah, just kind of ensuring that you have a balanced, you know, diet. This is something that actually is registered dietitian consults are covered by pretty much all insurance as preventative care. So just look into your insurance and just say like, I just like to make an appointment with a registered dietitian. Like they literally will help with just ensuring that you're, you know, eating healthy. If you're thinking about trying to get pregnant in the future, like they'll, you know, like to talk about like folic acid and calcium and vitamin D and all these things to kind of ensure your optimal nutrition status. And this is something where I'm like, I'm learning myself because I'm like, oh my God, this is like so important.
This year too,
Yeah.
my insurance covers nutritionists. That's
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. I was about to say, I think they most of them covered as 100%. They consider preventative care. So like seeing your primary care for just like a regular checkup, they want to keep you from.
And
you
I
know,
did that
pregnancy.
this year, and it's changed mine.
Good.
I
Yay.
love that.
That's great. That's a great question. I love that. Yeah.
Can we debunk the castor oil? Is that true or not? The castor oil pack.
Oh my gosh, I've never heard that there's science behind it. I always tell people like if you
Wait,
do
what's the
something
castor
for
oil?
like cramps and stuff.
Oh,
Castor oil will like essentially what it does is that it's pulling or like helping your digestive system, your body, your cramping, kind of everything in this section. You should put it on, and then people have been doing it for years, and now it's like kind of got its fat on TikTok.
Yikes. There's so many things on TikTok.
Everyone's now getting castor oil packs.
Oh my gosh.
I was wondering if there was a science
I
that
don't
you
think
guys had studied.
not that I know. But I always tell people if you do it and you feel better, then you know, and it's not harmful, then you can keep doing it. There's so many things on TikTok though that are just like total garbage. Like the whole cortisol thing, like had like a like I don't know what was happening there. It's still happening.
Yeah.
And then you can see people like selling crap. So they're just like, you know, here's my cortisol detox, and you're like, okay.
Oh, is it the one about like you're not ugly, but like
Your
it's just like your
cortisol phase?
your cortisol
Yeah.
phase? And I was like, damn.
Oh my God.
Well,
I made a video about that because the actual, like, you know, the Cushing's disease, which is like truly where your cortisol is high and it's causing that moon phase, is super rare. It's like a few in like millions of people. But it's just like if you gain weight, you notice it in your face because you can't exercise your face and you look at your face more and so you can tell a difference. So, but people are kind of preying on everyone's like, you know, like their insecurities or their like desire for an answer. They're like, oh my God, I'm really annoyed by this weight gain. Like, what can I do? And they're like, I have the answer for you. It's my detox for your cortisol. And so, you know, we basically say like, if we were to check your cortisol, it'll be fine. But like things like stress and poor sleep do affect your cortisol. So the easier thing rather than buying TikTok supplement stuff is just, you know, work on sleep, work on stress management, healthy exercise. Like those are natural ways to kind of regulate your cortisol. So there's so many of those things on TikTok where they kind of like take like a teeny kernel of truth and just blow it up into like insanity. And then like a lot of people try to monetize stuff and it's quite spectacular to see like the ways that they do this. But anyway. Like I said, there's oftentimes like a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of truth to what they're saying, but just enough to kind of get people to be like, oh, that sounds right. And then, you know, here's my money for castor oil packs.
Right.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
Yay. Thank you guys.
Thank you. You can follow us, Romance Unleashed on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, Spotify, Apple Music, Apple Podcasts. I'm gonna get it right one day. Thank you so much.